Azoth by Zeitgeistic. Chapter 10. Fermentation. Fermentation, the conversion of organic substances into a new compound in the presence of a ferment. "Well," said Hermione at breakfast. She served herself some eggs, exchanged polite words with Neville and Luna further down the table. "Well." "Well," Harry agreed. Draco hadn't made it down to breakfast yet. He wasn't sure whether to be relieved or disappointed. "Last night was certainly—" She cleared her throat out. "Yes," Harry agreed wholeheartedly. Millicent entered at that point, taking the available seat next to Hermione. "Morning, Potter. Duck lady?" Hermione's eyes narrowed. "Millicent Bulstrode," she hissed. "I dare you to say that again." Millicent smirked. "Dark lady." Hermione flicked her wand, her face set in a scowl, but she didn't voice the spell, and Harry couldn't tell when she'd cast on Millicent. Only the widening of Bulstrode's eyes, followed by their narrowing, proved that the spell had been cast at all. "While we're on the subject," said Harry. Hermione's furious gaze slowly swung from Millicent to him, but he was Gryffindor, and therefore was undersupplied with a sense of when a situation was becoming dangerous. "What were you surprised by last night that made you forget?" "Yes, I'd like to know as well," Millicent growled. Harry spared her a glance. Her face was red, and she was staring intensely at Hermione, no doubt refusing to admit that whatever spell Hermione had cast on her was painful. "Bloody prideful Slytherins," Harry thought, even if there weren't Slytherins anymore. "Exactly." "Oh, Harry," Hermione said. Overwhelmed by the suddenness of her mood swing, he was unprepared for Hermione throwing her arms around his neck and thereby tackling him to the floor. She sat above him, seemingly unaware that they were now on the floor of the great hall and in full view of the impressionable students staring at the head table. "I nearly forgotten. It was a letter." "From Ron?" Harry hazarded. From Wendell and Monica Wilkins." She barely got the words out before she burst into tears. Despite her apparent pain, Bulstrode pushed her chair back and gathered Hermione off of Harry and into her arms, where she immediately turned her face into Millicent's shoulder and attempted to both laugh and cry at once. Harry, concerned for her sanity, tipped his head towards the antechamber, the stuff used to enter the hall, and Millicent followed him through, half dragging, half carrying Hermione along. They had the misfortune of meeting Draco as he was coming in, and he took in the situation with a gimlet eye before his gaze slid to Harry's. Harry shrugged. Millicent grimaced at the wetness soaking the front of her apprentice robes. She patted Hermione's back awkwardly. "Go on, Holmes. What the bloody hell is wrong with you?" Hermione's sobs reached new levels. "Mill!" she wailed, half laughing, half crying. Fingers curled into the fabric of the other woman's robes and kneaded cat-like. "They wrote me a letter." "Who?" asked Draco and Millicent. Hermione only cried louder. Harry cleared his throat. "Our parents," he said. Millicent's nose scrunched. "Was she adopted? Why aren't they called Granger, and why wouldn't they write your letter, Holmes?" "I can't talk about this here," Harry said quickly. The last thing they needed was some enterprising student hearing about Hermione's morally questionable and legally certain, totally illegal, familiarity with memory charms on muggles. Rita Skeeter would start an inquisition. "Come on, my rooms are closest." Once installed in his rooms, Harry realized with great despair the degree to which he'd fucked up. They somehow all ended up in the same position they'd sat in last night, and he couldn't even look in the direction of his grey armchair without picturing Draco's exposed neck and hearing him reveal a secret fantasy. A secret fantasy that had kept Harry up all night in his bed, imagining himself in place of the mysterious man Draco wanked over. Hermione was once again curled around his shoulders, sniffling, but otherwise appearing to be rather more compos mentis. He called for tea, since none of them had a chance at a proper breakfast, and also because it gave him something to focus on besides Draco's tented trousers and his unashamed adjustment of them after spilling his own fantasy to the rest of them last night. It left Harry spilling rather more after their awkward departure. When all was served, Hermione disentangled herself from him and patted her face with the handkerchief thoughtfully provided by the house elves alongside her teacup from her rooms. The cup was black and had, in looping gold calligraphy, the word "Get shit done" scrawled around the outside. "This is my favorite cup," Hermione said, sniffing loudly. Harry was afraid that she might start again and search the biscuit offering desperately for one of the little chocolate ones she liked to distract her. This was the first time she'd ever cried over her parents, and he really had no idea what to do with it. "Remember, Harry, I bought it when we got to Australia," he finished for her softly. Back to the swearing. He felt his heart disintegrate in the face of her emotional breakdown. She let up so much since making friends with Millicent. "Hermione, what did the letter say?" She sniffed and reached down to rummage in her endless bag. Harry shook his head at the others' confused looks in his direction. She straightened, hands shaking as she unfolded a single crisp page of lined Muggle notebook paper. "Dear Miss Hermione Granger," Hermione read shakily, "my husband and I write to you in regards to your unusual visit to our home on the 19th of December last year. After your departure, we put the entire distressing event out of our minds. However, as we began sorting through some boxes for an impending move, I came across a photograph that I could not identify. I located the card you left with your forwarding address at the time, in hopes that you could help us to identify its origin. You see, the photograph showed a young girl who looked remarkably like you, sitting on my husband's lap in front of a Christmas tree. Neither of us could remember such an occasion. However, what disturbed us most was the appearance of snow outside the windows. Living in Australia, we have never seen such a thing as snow during Christmas, and as we have never spent the holidays in the Northern Hemisphere, we're quite at loss as to how it came to be. I have included the photograph in question for review. If you have any insight into this photograph, we implore you to respond. Sincerely, Doctors Monica and Wendell Wilkins." Harry exhaled in a rush. "Have you got the picture?" She nodded and passed an old Muggle photo to him. It had to have been taken only the year before they started Hogwarts. Hermione looked so much like the little girl he met on the train that it was impossible to deny. Seeing the shining look on Mr. Granger's eyes as he watched her unwrapping a brand-new book on zymology, Harry wondered how the Grangers could have forgotten their daughter, even with the aid of memory charms. And was that little cauldron set off to the side there? And of course it was. Hermione would have got her letter that September and been forced to wait almost an entire year before she could finally attend Hogwarts. She'd had plenty of time to prepare for it, unlike Harry. "Your memory charmed them," Millicent said. Of course she wasn't aghast or anything, just impressed. "Holy Merlin Granger," Draco said, also impressed. "Slytherins?" "Yes, well," said Hermione, and because, like Harry, she'd learned to read Slytherins of late, she added, "It would have been more impressive if I could have managed to reverse it after the war, but I couldn't. And they thought Harry and I were con artists trying to kill them for their life insurance policy." Neither of the Slytherins had, of course, any idea whatsoever what Hermione was talking about, but did gather that it was a crime to do such a thing, that Hermione was righteously indignant over the entire thing, on top of being dejected. Millicent stood. She had the presence of a military commander. "Come on then, Granger," she said. "We'd better get on it. You can compose a reply draft while I jump hints into lending that memory spells book she keeps behind the desk. We'll sort it." "Oh, Mill!" Hermione rushed her, but unlike Harry, Millicent barely swayed from the impact of Hermione's arms going around her neck. She fairly dragged the other woman from the room as much as anyone of Hermione's skinny stature could drag Millicent Bulstrode. And just like that, Harry was left alone again with Draco. With 2 strong arithmetics on the problem, there was a decent chance that Hermione's problem would be solved before they finished their apprenticeship, which just left Harry with his own unsolved problem. Unlike Hermione's, no spell could reverse it, although perhaps he could develop an anti-love potion. He chanced a guarded glance at Draco across the room from him. Merlin, he missed him. Even with their renewed friendship, it wasn't anything close to the one they'd shared before the event. The event that ruined everything, including and especially Harry himself. He missed the cavilling, the ease that came with their banter. He missed the way he was almost certain Draco's body was reacting, as Harry's own was, tingly and unbearably hot. Draco was a walking rococo movement, with the detached, undaunted air of an impressionist. Apprenticing under a portrait could teach a man a lot about art. It was unfortunate that it couldn't teach him anything about love, though. Specifically, how to get rid of it. He wondered if maybe Hermione could do one of her botched memory charms on him, so that he could forget everything he loved about Draco Malfoy and go back to just being his indifferent study and project partner. It wouldn't change Draco, though, and inevitably, Harry's luck, being what it was, would fall right back in love with that stupid git again. Then he'd ask Hermione for a memory charm, then he'd fall in love. It would last the rest of his life. It was sad, and it was inevitable. Although, when he peeked up at Draco, Harry saw the same downtrodden look on the other man's face that greeted him in the mirror each morning. His heart lurched, and he wondered, could Draco also be less than happy about their distant relationship? It was a look like that made Harry take leave of his senses. "Do you feel free?" Harry asked when the silence between them didn't seem to be abating. Draco startled. He charmed his tea hot again, sipped at it. "Sometimes." Harry nodded, as if this made loads of sense to him, when in fact it didn't. "I thought I'd be free after the war," he said, mostly to fill the empty space. "I thought I'd be done with all the bad stuff, and I'd marry Ginny Weasley, and we'd have a bunch of precocious kids, and I'd be an Auror, and she'd play for the Harpers, and it would be great." Draco snorted. "But?" Harry shrugged. "But it turns out that I didn't want that. It turns out that what I thought would make me free just made me feel trapped instead." Unbidden, his boggart returned to him, and then, just as unbidden, the form Hermione gave it when she cast Ridiculous. He pulled his legs up on the settee and propped chin on top, wrapping his arms about his calves to steady himself and his untouched tea. He fought down the instinctive reaction such thoughts gave his body, looked up at Malfoy from beneath his lash. "So I just wondered, really, what would make it free?" Draco exhaled in a rush. When he looked at Harry, Harry could have sworn that there was something more in the intensity of his gaze. Something deep and meant only for him. But then he blinked and shook himself to dispel it. It was the same look Draco always gave him when they were alone, and it probably meant he was just being too sappy for Draco's evil sensibilities. "I don't know." Harry shifted. The low, solid sound of Draco's voice certainly wasn't helping matters any. "Do you know what I think?" asked Harry. "No. I think being free is when you don't force yourself not to do something because you're afraid that doing it would put your heart at risk." Draco sneered, habitual and forced. "How could that be freedom, when I'd just be controlled by whatever pathetic emotions develop from it? How could you be free when you don't allow yourself to feel them?" Harry returned. "Either way, you're a slave, so then the question becomes, which would you rather enslave yourself to, happiness or misery?" "Spare me your pathos, Potter." Harry laughed, but it was deprecating. Well, it was worth a shot, he supposed. "All right, Malfoy," he said. "You win." Draco snorted. "Not likely." Harry stared at him, unspeaking. He'd run out of things to say, things that might bridge this weird divide between them. Last night, for a moment, he'd thought perhaps, but no. Then Draco spoke. "Sometimes I think my father has done more to destroy me in death than he ever did alive." Harry shook his head, uncertain. "What?" Draco looked away, smiling bitterly. "You're right, Potter. Either way, I'm destined for emotional Azkaban. And I'm intimately aware of what happens to people in there.
My father made sure of that.
Harry's chest clenched.
Draco, I should have.
Draco shook his head.
Don't bother. There was no love lost between us, only resentment. On both sides. I thought perhaps after the war I'd be free from it all. Then I thought maybe after his death and the trial I would. Now both of those have passed, and you're right. It doesn't end. And I don't know which way is escape and which is imprisonment.
Harry didn't either, frankly, because he wasn't entirely sure he knew what Draco was talking about. It could have been any number of things, but there was just one thing he hoped it referred to, and he couldn't bring himself to be selfish enough to broach the topic now. Though he did what he did when Hermione said something uncomfortable. He changed the subject.
What was that you were going to say last night, then, about the Felix Felicis? Because you know I'm right. It's a brilliant idea. It's dangerous,
Draco said right away, the previous conversation apparently easily forgotten.
Can you imagine what would happen if we accidentally ingested some bad luck potion? You have to take some risks to achieve greatness.
Draco snorted.
Please spare me, Albus Dumbledore. You may enjoy flinging yourself from cliffs, eating sweets from Weasley twins and interacting with muggles, but I have common sense, and my common sense says it's stupid to start out with the most dangerous option when we could test others first. Says the only Slytherin to ever perform a backflip from his broom during a Quidditch game to catch the snitch. If I'd failed, I would have landed on the Hufflepuff. It would have been fine, but I didn't fail, and Slytherin won the game. It was a calculated risk, not an ignorant one. Whatever, fine,
Harry said, but he was forcing himself to grin. He once heard that faking a smile tricked your brain into thinking you were happy, and therefore made you happy. Harry was all for that.
Listen, I was thinking the other day when I was brewing Polyjuice, and I wondered, what makes gold so special? Other than being gold?
Asked Draco, as if to clarify.
Arguably, human life is more special than gold, said Harry, and yet Polyjuice can change it around no big deal, so what is it about gold that refuses to be created from other materials? Everything's made from the same molecules, really, so in theory, alchemical processes are absolutely possible. It's just that no one's figured out. Are you talking about those muggle things again? Afraid so, said Harry.
He summoned a chemistry primer from his bedroom and passed it to Malfoy.
Read this first. My whole point here is that I think the reason Philosopher's Stones have been so unobtrusive is that wizards have the magic to change elements, but they don't have the knowledge. Muggles have the knowledge, but they don't have the magic. If we can apply our magic to Muggle chemical knowledge, then I think we can make gold from lead. And if we can make gold, then we can make 1/3 of a Philosopher's Stone.
Draco considered him for a long moment. Finally, he set the book into his robes.
All right, I'll give you this one this time, Potter. But next time you try to shove muggles down my throat, I want you to remember how nicely I accepted his request and let it warm you as I tell you to fuck off.
Harry smiled, remained smiling even after his flirty Botticelli closed behind Draco. It was sort of working, this smiling thing. It was just that it was also sort of making him batty. He was hopelessly in love, with no chance for redeemancy, and it wasn't really that bad. Well, it was crap, but he'd definitely been through worse. Being friends with Draco was about 3/5 fulfilling, and 3/5 were so much more than no fifth. He remembered how happy Ron had been over the summer and last Christmas, how happy Draco had been after the holidays in 8th year. I couldn't recall ever feeling that exuberant. For Harry, happiness had always been tempered by something else. Got a Hogwarts letter, but still had to live with people who hated him. Learned magic, but been chased by a psychopath. He'd fallen in love, but been rejected. But he was pretty much on par now with the happiest he'd ever been, and even if it sort of ached to look at Draco and not touch him, at least he got to look. A curious meow brought his attention to the floor. Severia peered up at him, already on her back and positioned for a belly rub.
I'm such a hot mess,
he announced to his cat. He began to purr. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Azoth by Zeitgeistic. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.